Well, I mean, it's an interesting issue because, as I'm getting a little older now, and I have a 14-year-old daughter, and I can really see the difference between being younger and being a little older. And when I was younger, I had a different way of looking at the world, and it was like part of the way I looked at it was my reaction to the world was, oh my God, it's terrible. I've got to look at it, I've got to expose it, and I've got to sort of say this is what it is and how terrible. And that was part of my reaction to it. And part of my reaction as I get older now is partly of similarly saying, oh my God, it's horrible, and wanting to be more positive about it. And yet I remember that feeling when I was that age too. I think it's important, to keep a sense of your own personal moral ethical sense in your work, and a sense, and I think you kind of know what that is. I think it's important to think that you are, I do think it's important to say, when you're making a film or any kind of statement that's going to other people, you're saying something to more than just yourself. And so, you should ask yourself, what am I saying to the people who I'm looking at this, and what is the responsibility I'm saying? I don't think you have to make a statement to please other people, but I think you always have to ask yourself, how do I feel about this? Am I saying suicide is good? And what is the responsibility of that statement, in terms of what you're saying about suicide? Am I saying that it's okay? I write a lot of things that are very violent. Have anyway. And what am I saying about the nature of violence? What am I saying about the nature of the use of violence? And I've always been very clear in my mind, at least, about, even in revenge fantasy and all that kind of stuff, about who's bad and who's good and why, and maybe it's not okay, you could argue, to even indulge in the fantasies and the themes. I'm not sure that I agree with that. But I think it's as long as you're making a clear moral distinction about the use of violence and who's a good guy and who's a bad guy, then it's all right. I do think that, we could digress into violence in the media and everything like that if we wanted to, but I do think that, part of what we do is we talk about those kind of things and drives in human beings, and I think that man is a violent animal, whether we want to deal with that or not, and one of the ways we deal with that is in art. And I think that the best we can do is to talk about the sort of the moral use and the moral distinctions we make. And I think that's the important thing to talk about in terms of the ethical things we do. I don't think it's okay to pretend that those things don't happen. And I don't think you want to make movies and stories where everything that happens is nice, because that's not a reflection of the world that we live in, because the world we live in is just awful. We actually in America live in a very nice world mostly. But if you look beyond our borders and you look around and then you pick up the newspaper or look at CNN, it's not a very nice world out there. And I think to ask people, and particularly young people, to make movies and to reflect in the art they make a world that doesn't reflect that they're seeing is actually irresponsible. It may be immoral, because it doesn't allow them to process, psychologically to process what they're taking in. And on a psychological level, they should be able to do that. They should be able to say, this is what I see, and I'm mirroring it back this way. And I think that's one of the things that movies and art does. And I think that as I say, I think the only thing the artist should do is maybe take a stand about what they think is about what's happening. At least either to show what's happening, as Degas does when he shows people being speared, and in one war he was drawing pictures of, and he writes the caption of the photo, or the picture is, "This is what you were born for." He's not saying this is good or bad. He's saying this is what a disgusting thing this is. And it's a terrible, terrible notion, but I don't think there's anything wrong in what he's done. He's showed a terrible act, and he's making a comment on it.